We sit here 2 months after the start of the current conflict that is affecting Tripoli and the surrounding area. Over the course of the last 2 months, we have seen over 90,000 civilians displaced from their homes and over 3,800 casualties as a result of the conflict, including over 150 civilians. With the continuation of the conflict and no signs of any end in sight, it looks very much like this will continue to have a significant impact on the civilian population in these areas, as many of the areas affected by the fighting were once highly populated. There are still many civilians trapped or unwilling to leave their homes that are now surrounded by fighting out of fear of losing everything that they've ever owned, and some people remaining behind to safeguard their houses from looting. Amongst the displaced population, several thousand are in collective shelters in Tripoli itself or in neighboring areas. In the first couple of weeks of the conflict, MSF supported these collective shelters with the provision of basic hygiene kits and medical support for those who had to flee their homes, leaving behind everything. We've also provided support to hospitals in Tripoli and also south of Tripoli as well. We remain in constant communication with the Ministry of Health and are standing by to provide any additional assistance that they require in order to cope with the additional casualties and the additional pressures on the existing public health system at what is an extremely difficult time. Amongst the population that are affected by conflict, some of the most severely affected are the migrants and refugees. The Libyan population are able to flee, and as I mentioned, shelters have been set up to host those that have been displaced by the conflict. But at the current time, there's only one such shelter that is available for migrants and refugees, who number hundreds of thousands in the affected area. These migrants and refugees living amongst the community are also displaced, are also affected by the conflict. And we know from the years of working in Libya that they have quite limited access to services and are often underserved, particularly at these heightened times of need. In Tripoli, we are working in a number of the detention centers. These are locations where migrants and refugees are arbitrarily and indefinitely detained. They are not charged and they don't receive any access to lawyers or anything like that. And so there's really no option for them to be able to have a formal process to be able to be released from those detention centers. We have been providing medical assistance in these detention centers for around 3 years now, and we have long documented the poor conditions experienced by migrants and refugees who are living in places that were not built for human habitation, and are always in dire need of basic services such as medical care, such as water, poor sanitation, and increasingly food. We documented in March with a report on the food situation in Sabah Detention Center that we were seeing high rates of malnutrition in that detention center. Now, over the course of the conflict, this situation has only got worse, with food supply really coming to a halt in the conflict-affected area and the detention centers in and around Tripoli. Over the course of the conflict, we've seen much more extreme impacts upon detention centers and the population inside. There have been several detention centers that were directly affected by the conflict, and which refugees and migrants eventually had to be urgently relocated to other areas. We have seen in the case of Qasr Bengashir, which is a detention center south of Tripoli, on April the 23rd, there was a horrific attack in which unarmed migrants and refugees, men, women and children, were subjected to an attack by an armed group during which over 14 people were shot, many of them children under the age of 18. We have also seen the impact of the conflict on other detention centres. In Tajura detention centre, just in the last month, an airstrike on the compound resulted in a large piece of shrapnel flying through the roof of the women's cell. It landed just less than a metre away from a mattress where an infant was sleeping at the time. We were in Tajura detention centre the morning after this incident happened, and we took our mental health team to talk to the women who had been locked into this dark room at the time that this happened. They were terrified, they were scared for their lives, and they were in desperation at the fact that this was the reality that they'd known for months of living in detention centres without any clear indication of when they would be able to leave, and knowing that they were sitting here in the midst of a country and a city at war. There are no safe spaces, there are no safe places in Libya to take these migrants and refugees in order to remove them from the risk of conflict. This is why we are urgently calling for the humanitarian evacuation of all those who are at risk of losing their lives or falling victim to the ongoing conflict and the wider situation that faces refugees and migrants in Libya. We do recognize that there have been efforts over the last couple of months by governments, including the government of Italy, to offer some reprieve in terms of the humanitarian corridors to remove refugees and migrants from detention centres to Italy. But so far, this has only been in relatively small numbers. Only 300 so far, approximately, have been evacuated from detention centres. Over the same period, over 1,200 people have been intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard as they attempt to flee Libya and returned to those very same detention centres where people are being removed from. That's 4 times as many since the start of the conflict that have been returned to detention centres in Libya as have been removed by the humanitarian corridor efforts of the Italian government. I think I'll hand over at that point to Julian.
Thank you. So we are also working in less directly affected areas by the current conflict in Misrata region, but also in the western mountains. And actually, just to illustrate the fact that there is absolutely no viable today solution for those people, is that in Rayan detention center we have this very small number of 25 people that are stuck there. And Rayan is in the extreme south of Tripoli, almost out of Tripoli. And they are on the front line. And they've been there since the beginning of the conflict, and there is no solution for them, and they are still trapped there. Just for you to picture, 1 month ago we had anti-aircraft artillery installed just next to the DC. Those people are sick, most of them are already registered with UNHCR, and today there is no solution for those people. For the rest, where we work, in Misrata and Zintan, in the western mountains, the daily situation is really bad. We know that it has been illustrated already in the past, but for me it's really important that I bear witness, because of being in those detention centers many times, we're speaking with those people, and they are just asking us to bear this message outside of the detention centers. We have detention centers in the Misrata region where people have less than 1 square meter per person. There is huge lacks of water, the food is not enough and very poor quality. We have, as Sam said, buildings that are not done, that are not made for detention. So they use warehouses or old schools. And then in order for the people not to escape, they just block the windows with bricks. And people are stuck there without ventilation. And you can imagine the risk for their mental health, being stuck there for months, for years for some of them. But also in terms of global health, we have high levels of tuberculosis, and these conditions are just creating more disease and more risk for their lives. The ongoing conflict is indeed very worrying for the lives of the people, but what I want to just clarify here is that even not being in on the front line is still, putting people's lives at risk. I mean, you can die in the detention centers today. We have these very worrying reports in the western mountains that 20 people died since September, probably from tuberculosis, but also, and this is an increasing, another element that increases the risk of getting tuberculosis is the very bad level of nutrition, and I won't say the quantity of food, but the quality definitely yes, and the quantity in certain detention centers. Important also for you to understand that in the detention centers we also have women and children. We have minors, we have unaccompanied minors. Of course, in the current situation and conditions in Libya, the people that are illegally detained are actually, including the women, are actually guarded by men with, very poor conditions. So we had even women that give birth in some of the detention centers, and we managed to take some of them out to deliver, but sometimes there is no other way for them, and they are forced to be back in the detention centers with the kids. So, I mean, the situation stays very, very worrying in general, and this has to stop as soon as possible. This human suffering is too high, and we know that globally speaking, if you consider the people living and the migrant workers were living and making making life in Libya, actually those that are in detention represent only 1% of the total number of people, foreigners working in Libya. So it's important to keep this figure in mind. We only have today, it's way too much, but we only have 5,800 people in the detention centers. What I mean here is that detention is not, a solution, absolutely not a solution. And detention actually, should end as soon as possible. And this small figure also makes us believe that a solution outside of the detention centers and evacuation can be possible. Yes. We are also presenting the disembarkation point in Homs whenever it's possible. So we helped 791 people that were brought back since the beginning of this month only. What is worrying today is that there is absolutely no way actually to have an idea of how many persons are dying at sea. When you know how many persons are, when you see the numbers, the figures, actually, it's because you had people who came back So you have to have survivors on the boats to know how many persons disappeared. But if you have a boat that disappears entirely, no one can tell how many people lost their lives. It's quite worrying also because we receive testimonies in the disembarkation point that some of those boats were crossed or seen by commercial boats and just disregarded. So some commercial boats are bringing back people in Libya, totally against the global position of all the actors, saying that it's not a port of safety. But also we fear that some of them are just disregarded.
Prima di lasciare spazio a domande, alcune puntualizzazioni, alcune conferme in italiano per sintetizzare un po' i contenuti di questa conferenza. Le storie che avete sentito sono le storie raccolte dai nostri team medici in Libia e sono la risposta fattuale, circostanziata, ferma alle posizioni che ancora sentiamo da parte di rappresentanti delle istituzioni italiane, secondo cui la Libia è un porto sicuro, secondo cui è consentito, accettabile, conforme al diritto internazionale intercettare le persone in mare e riportarle in Libia. Il messaggio che oggi trasmettiamo è un messaggio chiaro, che la Libia non è un porto sicuro e che è urgente aumentare quel meccanismo di evacuazione immediata e urgente dai centri di detenzione che costituisce l'unica strategia possibile nel breve periodo per ridurre la sofferenza in quel paese. È ovvio che nessuna strategia di evacuazione è sufficiente se non è accompagnata da altri posizionamenti politici. È inutile evacuare una persona se poi 4 persone vengono respinte nei centri di detenzione dopo le intercettazioni in mare operate dalla Guardia Costiera libica. Per cui il messaggio che abbiamo trasmesso alle autorità italiane, il messaggio che stiamo trasmettendo agli altri partner europei è un messaggio molto chiaro. Innalzate la scala delle evacuazioni urgenti, ma mettete in atto anche delle misure per interrompere il supporto alla Guardia Costiera libica e le attività di intercettazione in mare che la Guardia Costiera libica compie e che conducono poi a un ritorno di queste persone nei centri di detenzione, e soprattutto lavorate per lo smantellamento del sistema di detenzione, che è un sistema di detenzione illegale in Libia, che costituisce un fattore di instabilità, un fattore di alimentazione e di indiretto supporto all'attività delle milizie ed è un elemento di estrema preoccupazione che riteniamo debba essere oggetto di un'azione forte, precisa e determinata da parte delle autorità italiane. Chiudiamo qui anche per lasciare spazio ai vostri interventi, per cui se ci sono domande, richieste di chiarimenti o di precisazioni, a voi la parola.
Prego.
I just wanted to know the role of UNHCR in the center, because as far as I know, the competency just for certain nationalities and not for others. So I was wondering if you could explain a bit. Thanks.
Yeah. So UNHCR have their role within Libya is to identify what are generally referred to as people of concern to UNHCR. So those are people who would be considered as having pretty much de facto refugee status due to their countries of origin, so where they've fled from. And UNHCR, one of their main roles is to deal with the registration of those people and make sure that first and foremost that they are known to the organization. There are an estimated 110,000 refugees in Libya, and UNHCR have registered around 57,000 of those refugees that are believed to be in Libya. That is a first step towards a resettlement process for the fortunate ones who are able to be taken out of Libya to safe countries in order to have a bit of a better opportunity in life and to prevent the return of them to their countries of origin where they fled.
I'd like to understand the general picture of the situation there. You told us 5,800 people in detention centers. Who is dealing with those detention centers? Where are the other 110,000 refugees? Where are they? The Coast Guards, Libyan Coast Guards, when they turn back with those refugees, where do they go? That's I mean, we don't understand the people in Italy. How is it working, the whole system, if it's working, let's say?
So, I mean, in terms of looking at the numbers, because that, of course, is one thing that doesn't seem to match up in terms of the detention system. As I said, there are 110,000 estimated refugees, so that's people who have fled persecution or conflict in their countries of origin. There are then a further between 500,000 to 800,000 migrants who are also in Libya. The vast majority of this population are not detained. They are living their lives amongst the community. They are contributing to the Libyan economy. Many of them did not go to Libya with an aim to cross to Europe, but also a number of them did. The situation that we see, and as my colleague referenced, the mistreatment that occurs to people during their journeys through Libya, and the poor conditions in detention centers may well be considered as a contributing factor towards the decision of people to leave Libya. And I think this is the key point in terms of, by creating a hostile environment, by creating a deterrence policy that has long been the policy of the EU and member states, it is not having the desired impact in terms of preventing people from attempting to leave to come to Europe, and in many cases it may in fact be a determining factor in people's decision to try to flee Libya.
Yeah, about this I have a very concrete example of someone that I met in one of the detention centers where we work. This person worked 11 years in Bahrain and making a life, and then he decided, he went back to his country, and then the only option for him to find work was to go to Libya, and he started to work in Libya. Then he was kidnapped by traffickers, and brought in remote areas, etc. And after in the streets, he was taken to an official detention center once he was released by the traffickers. And this person is so traumatized, is in the detention center, and for him there is no option today other than just trying to cross. And it was absolutely not his intention at the beginning. So it's really those conditions Sam was talking about that sometimes creates also, in this case, some kind of a push factor somehow.
Yes, I'm Visa Milini for the German Press Agency, DPA. I wanted to ask you about the 300 who were evacuated. Can you explain why they made it and not the other 5,800? What are the criteria for that decided their evacuation? Is it because they're more vulnerable? Is it because they were in detention centers where it was easier to move them away? And also I want to ask you if you can confirm whether you're present in Zintan.
Yes, so I will tackle Zintan with your first question actually. I will not enter into the details of the UNHCR criteria. This is for them to see, and with the countries, the resettlement countries, to see them. But what we can say for sure and very clearly is that there is a huge and incredible big lack of resettlement places, outside of Libya. Just to give you this example of Zintan, where we now, we've been 2 weeks already in Zintan, and we will establish a more permanent project in that region. We have people in a big hangar, approximately 550 persons. They're all registered, and they are there since 2 years and registered since 2 years. So the problem here is not so much the criteria only, but more the number of places that are available.
Hi, this is Fiona from IT. My question is, are you in contact with both the parties, the government of Sarraj and Haftar, and if so, what can you tell us about the conflict from there, from the ground?
So, as in all conflict situations, our primary objective is to meet the needs of the population wherever they exist, regardless of which side of the conflict they find themselves on. In order to do so, obviously that means to be able to gain access to them, that we need to be open and transparent with the different parties of the conflict, to be able to access those areas where many people are living or trapped or remain in detention centers. What was the second part?
What can you tell us about the conflict from there, from the ground? What are you feeling about from the militaries, what is the atmosphere over there, since you are over there, since you are working over there?
I mean, this is not the first time that the people of Tripoli have known conflict. But the fear at this point in time is that the conflict could go on for an extremely long time. There has been no significant change in the conflict dynamic since its start 2 months ago. There has continued to be shelling in residential neighborhoods near the front lines, and every single night there are airstrikes that reach deep into the city of Tripoli and also in the areas to the south of Tripoli as well. I think the most stirring kind of imagery for me is in terms of the dedication of our national staff, many of whom are living or had houses in the areas that are affected by conflict. And those national staff were having to cross checkpoints every single morning just to be able to come to work. And of course, we were saying to them, please don't take any unnecessary risks just to be able to come into work. And they were saying, well, first of all, if I stayed home with the conflict raging outside, I would go crazy. But mostly, I want to come to work. I want to be able to provide any assistance that I can. I want to continue working with MSF to reach the most vulnerable people at this extremely difficult time.
There was an evacuation program towards south, towards Niger, as an example. Is that a way of saving people from this detention center that you think is valuable, that you think is a good way?
Yeah, I'm coming back to what I was saying before, is that the problem is the number of places that are available for resettlement. Okay?
Not only Europe.
Yes, yes. What I mean is that the system that is already in place is that you have people that are evacuated from Tripoli to Niger, and from Niger they are sent to resettlement countries. Now in Niger they reach the ceiling, they cannot accept more people. So basically, because they are not evacuating from Niger, actually people are stuck in Libya. And this is what we have all to understand, and the countries that are taking people and could take more people have to understand, is that not taking people from Niger doesn't mean that people will stay in Niger. It means that you have people staying in the detention centers in the middle of Tripoli or in Ariane on the front line. So it's some kind of a domino effect, and now everything is blocked basically. So this is what we have to unblock today.
Ci sono altre domande? No, direi che
Possiamo passare alle...
Molto buono.
se qualcuno